here are the good things. First off, 20% unemployment is horrible, and that's where it looked like we were heading, but thanks to the stimulus, thanks to the economy beginning to reopen, and by the way, I do think it should have reopened earlier. That's another story, but we're going to get back to that 9% unemployment. And here are the benefits of here's the benefits of having unemployment, but not crazy unemployment. So if we could get back to, if we're aiming for like 6-7% unemployment and we get to 9% unemployment by the end of the year, that's a really good thing. For one thing, when unemployment's at 3%, the danger is we could have too much inflation, because employees will start to negotiate, like poor skilled employees will be able to negotiate for higher and higher salaries. Companies will have to pass those salaries on to their products if they can, and that creates inflation, and then usually the Federal Reserve has to start raising interest rates to combat inflation. But with low unemployment, with high unemployment, like 8-9% unemployment, it actually creates pressure against inflation, so that helps the U.S. economy. It's not great. I'm just trying to say the upside. It's better for people to be working, and better to have a thriving employment space, which we'll get to around between 4 and 6 unemployment. I know I'm getting into the weeds here of all the economics, but I'm just saying why the direction is important now more than the actual number. The other benefit of higher unemployment is probably too many people were employed before. Like, it didn't make sense for many companies to have full employment, because if they started new, it made it harder for, it makes it harder for you guys, for people to change their minds about their careers. Like, yes, you could change your mind about your career when you're at a job, but right now everyone's getting unemployment benefits. There's going to be another stimulus package most likely. I think now that the coronavirus lockdowns are ending and the full economy has not yet reopened, and still the stimulus benefits are still here, now more than ever is the time to reevaluate what it is you actually want to do with your life going forward. And I know everybody was saying this at the beginning, like in March, oh, this is a perfect time to write your book or to try that side hustle. It wasn't really a perfect time, because we were scared then. Everybody was scared. Nobody knew what was going to happen in the health crisis, whether their family was just going to all die, whether their country was going to have 10 million deaths, some of the models were saying, which was ludicrous, but there it was. So people were scared. Nobody wanted an extra homework assignment, like, oh, now I've got to write a book on top of being scared to death. Nobody wanted that. And, now we've talked a lot about side hustles. We've talked a lot about different business models. We've gone through 3 different 30-day book challenges, which I could summarize again if people would like. But this few week period right here, where we know, now, everyone listening to this knows right now that they are not going to get sick from coronavirus, at least over the next few months. Do you know, Robin, yesterday was the first day since the lockdown began, there were no new deaths in New York State.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, 0 new deaths. So meanwhile, we're all still locked down, which kind of, again, I don't blame anybody, because nobody knew which strategy would work. We still don't know which strategy will work. Some states and some countries didn't lock down at all. And it's fair to say Sweden has a much smaller population than us, so it was easier for them to do that experiment.
Yeah.
Some countries and some states did more, particularly countries, some countries did more testing, some countries did more aggressive travel bans. I don't know. The U.S.'s first travel ban was no flights from China. Then the day after we got back from Europe, there was no more new flights from Europe, so we got back just in time. They were letting back U.S. citizens, but
right.
I would have gotten scared to death. I did not want to stay in Europe. No offense to Europe. So, everything was kind of scary though, because every day there was new restrictions, new curfews, new lockdowns, new businesses being shut down. What would happen next? And I couldn't tell if this was worse for my health or worse for my wallet. And I think many people felt the same way. And we got used to the new normal. Really was us just gathering together on these IG lives every day and figuring out what to do during the day. And hopefully we got some stuff done, all of us, but there's nobody's going to blame you if you didn't get anything done except watch TV. There's nothing wrong with watching a lot of TV. We watched so much TV. We watched Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
Favorite new sitcom, Dave. There was only one season, but Dave on Hulu. The League. We've been watching. This is my second time watching Space Force, which I don't like as much, but it's cute. It's fun.
Funny.
We've watched movies. I can't even remember all the things we've watched. We've become, as a nation, experts on television. Everybody listening to this right now can watch, can write a movie script possibly.
Give us some ideas, some other movies.
Oh yeah, tell us if you have your favorite movies. Tell us, and we'll shout them out. What movies you've been watching during this
We watched in the beginning. We watched Outbreak.
Oh yeah, Outbreak, which was I did not want to watch Outbreak.
Oh, it was great.
Outbreak was about. First off, the advisor to Outbreak was Dr. Larry Brilliant, who was an old friend of mine. He was an investor in a company that I started in 1999, and he was on the board of directors. Dr. Larry Brilliant, and then he went on to be the head of Google.org, which was he managed all of Google's charities. But Outbreak, the movie, was advised by him because in the 1970s, he single-handedly took the smallpox vaccine and went village by village in India and completely eradicated smallpox from India. So he was an expert in pandemics. And then he joined Google.org to help them donate to prevent possible pandemics. I guess that didn't work so well. But he was the advisor on Contagion, and it scared the hell out of me watching it.
Oh, Contagion, yeah, that's right. We watched Outbreak and Contagion. Contagion, though, it felt like while we were...
it felt very realistic.
It was very real. Everything they were saying.
Except it was both more fatal and more contagious than the coronavirus.
Yeah, but at that point, we didn't know if it was. Or
so I'm like, turn this off, and you and our daughter Lily were like, no, we're watching. And then I saw Larry. Do you know the last time I interacted with Larry? I think I've told this story before, but he basically sent the FBI to me after 9/11 because he told the FBI I might know where Osama bin Laden was because a company I had started had an investment from another investment firm that the bin Laden family was invested in. Now, the bin Laden family is a big construction family in Saudi Arabia. Osama bin Laden is one of like 27,000 children, so they all have like lots of kids there. How many wives is the average like wealthy person in Saudi Arabia? Have you lived in Kuwait?
You can have up to 4.
You could have up to 4.
Right, but you have to have enough money to create the same environment for each one. So
really, there's like it's almost like
so you have to
separate but equal rules.
Yes. You have to. So if you have enough money to do this exactly the same for the first one, you can do the same for the second. And if you have enough for the third one, you can have a third. Up to 4. Up to 4.
Was there anybody that you knew who had like 12?
No, you can only go up to 4.
But did anyone break the law?
I don't think so.
And
I don't know, but I don't. Think so.
Did you know any third or
they
fourth
were starting
wives?
to get divorced with some of them because
so they could rotate out.
Well, just because there's so much.
I need someone else for the bench.
Problems.
I need another third string
They're going
quarterback.
More Westerner.
So
ways.
Do you know anybody who was like the third wife of somebody who liked it? Like, did you know any multiple wife situations?
Yep.
And would they talk to you and say, "Oh, this is such a drag. I'm the third wife." Like, what did they like about it?
Well, the third wife, the one that they had last. I mean, they get younger, of course. So they're usually the ones that do a lot of things with the men and stuff. But then the man has to, visit the other ones as well. It's weird.
Wait, they have to? Does the men have to rotate?
They rotate
sexually through the 4,
they rotate.
Or could one be?
I don't know.
This is the wife of the finances. This is the wife.
Stay with, their husband.
They don't have like a favorite. Do the husbands have like a favorite that's the one they're having sex with?
Typically, the last one. I don't really know. I didn't really ask those questions.
Do the women get jealous of the one who's the favorite?
I would think so.
I feel like, why can't this be like a sitcom or a TV? Like Big Love was on HBO, which was the same thing for Mormons. I feel like this should be like a show in the U.S.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's just not a good thing to do.
What?
To do something like that.
Are you telling me I should? I shouldn't have multiple wives?
Because you're making fun of the, their culture.
Yeah, HBO already did it for Mormons.
I did not like that either. So, I don't know, that's just me.
Anybody ever propose to you to be a fourth wife or anything?
Not a fourth wife, no.
First wife?
No, not first wife.
Okay, somebody asked this question the other day, which I will answer. We could answer. Why get married? Like, what are the benefits to getting married? And I will say, from my perspective, and it's really two questions. Why emotionally do you ever feel the urge to get married, and then why legally do it? Because you could still spend your life with somebody without getting the government's permission.
That's
like,
true.
why do people feel the need to go to the government and say, please, can you just put a stamp on our piece of paper that says Robin and I are now married? Like, why do that with the government? But let's just talk why get married in general. And it's a good question, because when you first meet somebody, you think, and this is true for every couple, it's true for us, that you get all excited, like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see that person again, and I can't wait to, be with them, and you have this dopamine rush when you even think about the other person. And eventually, though, as I've discussed with Andrew Huberman, who was on my podcast a couple months ago from Stanford's neuroscience lab, eventually that dopamine rush settles down, and you kind of have to find other reasons to be happy. And so the other neurochemical reason to be happy is serotonin and oxytocin. Oxytocin is this neurochemical where you feel good, even just touching another person, your oxytocin gets triggered. And serotonin is a neurochemical that gets triggered when you feel satisfied with your life. So dopamine is called the molecule of more, and serotonin is the molecule of be here now. And so gratitude, like when I'm grateful that you're in my life, that triggers serotonin. When we're bonding, that triggers serotonin and oxytocin. When I'm missing you and I'm excited to see you, that's more of a dopamine thing, and that happens more often in the beginning of a relationship. So that's why typically, sometimes in some cultures, they get married right away because they still have that dopamine thing going, and that's how they get married. And in some cultures, you wait for the dopamine, U.S. culture in particular, you wait for the dopamine rush to be over, and you're still happy with each other. You have that serotonin feeling with the other person. You're satisfied and you're happy to be with them and to spend companionship time with them, as well as other time. And so in the U.S., we tend to wait more than the 6 weeks or the 8 weeks. I mean, I probably asked you to marry me when we knew each other about 5 weeks, right? 5 or 6 weeks, and then we got married 2 weeks later.
Yeah, something like that.
So I do think that that's fast. The average couple shouldn't do that. But the other thing is, why get married at all? I find for myself, it really is a nice feeling to know that this is somebody you could make plans with at various stages of your life. So this is someone who is not just someone that I'm attracted to, but someone that I feel I could partner with. And it's someone who shares similar values and ideas. Like with you, unlike with many relationships I've had, I can just freely express what I believe and what I think. And sometimes you have to kind of hide what you think. Like I've had situations where even politically, if I didn't agree 100%, I'd have to hide, or they would get like too angry. Yeah. And because I often make decisions out of fear rather than growth, which is a bad thing to do. You always want to make this. You always want to check yourself whenever you feel you're making a decision out of fear. Make sure the decisions you make are out of growth. Fear decisions are never good decisions, but every decision is either a fear or a growth decision. If you decide to, if you decide to quit a job, you're either making a fear decision, like, oh no, I better quit this because, or no, I can't quit this job because I might not get another job that's as good, blah, blah, blah. Or you can make a growth decision, like, I'm going to quit this job because I'm going to have more opportunities doing this side hustle or doing this side business. Or if I switch jobs from this company to this company, I'll work with better people and I'll make more money and maybe it'll be more stable. So you always have to decide. So I think sometimes people make fear decisions in relationships. They stay with someone because they think they're not going to be able to find someone else, or I think for men, they might think, oh, I'm not going to be able to find someone as beautiful. Men tend to be focused on looks, and whereas a growth decision would be, oh, I want to be with this person because not only am I very attracted, but this is a partner in life. We could make decisions together. We could decide where to live together. We could decide how we're going to spend our old age together. If I decide to focus on writing a book, my life partner can help balance other areas of my life, and vice versa when she is doing her thing. And we can help each other with our kids. Other relationships I've had, they didn't have kids, and I realized only when I met Robin that was a problem for me, that I wanted to be with. I had 2 kids, and I didn't realize how if someone never had kids, not that they were a bad person, but they just didn't know how to react to me having kids, and they weren't necessarily, they thought they would be able to handle that role, but they weren't really able to handle it. And it was really important for me to find someone who would get along with my kids. And so I think emotionally, that's why I like marriage, is this idea that, I don't know, that you can see into the future a little more easily. Like, and by the way, it's a huge waste of time going on dates. And then, you know what the worst thing is like, I remember one time, this is like 2007, I went out on a date, or 2008, I went out on a date, and I don't know what I was thinking. I should have said coffee. And I like went all the way out to Coney Island, which is like an hour and a half away, and I meet this person, and within 12 seconds, I realized, this is the worst. She like barely spoke English, and I wasn't attracted to her. And we go to dinner, and I'm stuck in Coney Island, and we go to dinner, and it's like a 2-hour dinner, and then it's another hour and a half trip home. Like, what a waste of time. And if you're doing that, even 1 out of 10 dates, that's you're wasting like 40 hours of time, not to mention all the other hours of the dates that you're wasting time. So I don't know, for me, I wanted to stop wasting time too. Although again, I thought I wasn't going to go on, when I met you, I didn't think, and maybe this was a good thing, I did not think I was going to go on any dates for a year. I was so sick of being in relationships. But like we told in the other story, it's like, I halfway through our dinner, I realized, if I do have a checklist, she's helping me figure out what I want on my checklist. And then I'm really realizing, if she meets all these things on the checklist and I'm attracted to her, boom, I should go for it. Which I did. I never not go for it. When you look like me, you kind of have to be very, you have to be fearless about going for it. Because that's my advantage over other people who look like me, is nerdy people get shy about going for the what they want, and I'm not shy about it. I'm appropriate, right? I wasn't inappropriate.
Of course.
But I'm not shy in those situations. Like, why do you think? And then there's the legal question. But like, why do you think it's good to a good thing to get married?
It's the same thing. I feel I love being with somebody. I wanted to find that person that could be my partner in life. That we could do things. A best friend.
Are we best friends?
Father for my kids. Huh?
Are we best friends?
We are.
There you have it.
And
the father. I remember when we had decided to get married, but before we got married, I remember one time you even called me. We weren't yet always spending. We were pretty much spending every night, but there was one night, I don't know, and you called me and like, this will be so good for the kids. And you're right. Like now, both our kids. Yeah. We have 5 kids between us, so both have the benefit of being able to talk to the other. And with your kids, you lost your husband, they lost their father. It's probably been, not that I'm replacing their father, but it's probably been good that they're able to
for sure
talk to someone with as many TikTok followers as I have. I'm probably a good influence on them, since all the since 20,000 other kids on TikTok think I'm a good influence. Why not your 3 kids? So
but no, I think it's I don't know, I think everyone has their own opinion, and whatever works best for them. But luckily we felt the same way, and so that's
we never
us. So there's no wrong or right, it's just whatever works best.
I don't think I had any hesitation at all. And and I know on this IG Live, one of the people who was at our wedding, which was just in downtown in City Hall, where all the protesters gathered yesterday. Lisa's on the IG Live; she was there. But and then the other thing is the legal question. Why legally do you think it's important?
Well, the way the system is set up here is that, for insurance purposes, for, I don't know, it just seems to be easier when you have a marriage license.
How come we've been married for a year and a half now and I don't have insurance? That seems to go against your argument.
Uh-huh. Well, it's because the insurance that I have with the kids is from my late husband through the oil company. So I already asked if they could put you on to the account. They said no, just because that's like a benefit for,
I did get my very first American Express card ever because I'm just hanging off your account or whatever. I never had in my entire life. I've never had a credit card. Well, it's not an American Express card. I don't count as a credit card. It's not a debit card or a credit card. It's like a charge card because you have to pay that month, right? You don't. There's no credit.
They still allow you to pay it if you want, but we always pay it off because there's I don't want to pay the interest.
But I've never in my entire life had a credit card.
It is a revolving credit card.
Well,
which
there you go. So this is my first credit card in my life, and I've always had a problem renting apartments because I had no credit card history.
Yeah.
Like I've never had a credit card in my life, and I've had to meet at least 3 condo boards because they were so confused when they looked at my credit history. And I would go to them and I would say, why is it so unusual to be an American who's never been in debt? I mean, I've had housing debt and I've had tax debt, but I've never had just normal debt and like credit card debt or medical debt. And I had student loan debt, but I paid that off very quickly. Not very quickly, but quick enough.
Right.
And but they would just be dumbfounded, like, I don't understand. Like, how could you have no credit history? And
off the grid.
Yeah, they thought I was like a terrorist. That's very un-American not to have debt. I'm sorry, I just never really. I would have gotten in debt actually. I'm bad with paperwork, so I never filled out the paperwork. They're always like, here, we'll help you fill it out, but I don't like. It's a waste of time, like filling out the paperwork. So
that's true.
I think legally also, I don't know. There's something. I don't know. Maybe we grew up in a culture where legally and emotional marriage were tied together, and I feel like the reality is it's harder to split up with somebody when you're legally married as opposed to common law married or just like living together.
It's just a super big commitment. I mean, more so than just okay, we're just going to be together.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're living, if you're living with somebody, you could say, look, you have to move out now. I don't want to be together. You can't do that if you're married. It gives you a little bit more. If there's problems, I guess there's a little bit more impetus to work through them.
Right.
I think kids makes a relationship like that, and legally being married makes it, and living together. So all these things like kids living together, being legally married, but legally married is the clincher because then you need to hire a lawyer, which is a drag.
Yeah.
And so I think there's some element of that there. I wanted to be legally married.
Me too.
Even though I know conceptually it doesn't make any sense at all to wish for government. It probably would be better for you not to be legally married to me. Just because I sometimes, not right now, but I sometimes, I'm late on my taxes or I'm just so bad with paperwork that is in some way or shape going to negatively affect you. I can guarantee it.
Well, I'll positively affect you because I don't like being late on those. So see, I make sure that we're not late.
I don't know if your dreams are going to come true there. Jay has sent the IG Live link. I am going to answer some questions. So, yes, yesterday I talked a lot about the lockdown and now the protests. And Jay, by the way, since yesterday's show was all about the riots, we should probably put that podcast up as soon as possible, like today or something. Just telling Jay here. But here's a question also about this. How are we going to come out of all this, the lockdown and now the protests? That's a great question because even though we've gotten, right in the beginning of these IG Lives, I described, I'll tell you where I was right and where I was wrong. I was right when it came to when the virus would peak. I said April 15th. I was right when I said when the virus would probably be over. I said around June 1st. And now we see in New York State, which is the state that was hit the worst in the United States, there was 0 new deaths yesterday, which means that if there was 0 new deaths yesterday, that means there were probably 0 new cases or 0 new infections 15 days ago, because it takes 15 days to go from infected to death. And it takes 2 weeks to go to symptoms and severe symptoms / hospitalization, and then another 5 days to go to death. So where are we going to go from here? I kind of think,
especially since we have all these protests.
Yeah.
And we were, by the way, there yesterday.
Yeah, so we went to the protest yesterday.
And not everyone had masks.
Oh, by the way.
And everyone's hugging each other.
Yeah, so and this is the 11th day.
We loved meeting these kids.
Oh yeah, we talked to many people, young and old,
Yep.
white, black, male, female. We
Very
talked to people.
positive.
If you go to the protests, some guidelines, and this is what I said yesterday. During the day, the protests are peaceful, and it's a great time to listen. Whether you agree, whether there's some aspects, nobody agrees on everything, and nobody understands all the issues. There are many complicated issues. I think nobody disagrees that there's a lot of systemic racism in the U.S. and around the world, and nobody disagrees that what happened to George Floyd is horrible. I think some tactics people disagree on, but it's very important if you go to these protests, A, be safe, go in the afternoon, B, listen. Nobody knows everything. Listen to what everybody's saying. Listen to what these people, and it's usually younger people than us, listen to what they're passionate about. Listen to what is bothering them as society moves forward. Let's view this as society 2.0. Like, we're coming out of this shutdown, the first shutdown in the history of the human species, and it's an opportunity to grow. And why do I say there's systemic racism? Well, it's just like saying in different countries at different times, different groups of society were treated worse. Like, it was just 55 years ago that blacks and whites drank out of separate water fountains. And so why was that even... So you ask, that's clearly racist, but then there was a law passed that ended that. So what makes it systemic? Systemic means it's so much in the system we can't even recognize it. Well, in I believe it was the 13th Amendment, the amendment that freed the slaves, there was some language that could be interpreted as saying, sorry, it might have been the 14th Amendment, where you had to treat African Americans and whites and every race equal. But the Supreme Court interpreted that, and a lot of states interpret that to be separate but equal. So you could still have people go to separate schools, separate water fountains, separate buses, whatever, as long as it was equal conditions. Now, the problem was that it wasn't equal conditions, and even if it were, that's still a racist policy.
Yeah.
And the problem is it's systemic, because this was baked into the Constitution, into the amendments in the Constitution, and the Supreme Court, until Brown versus the Board of Education and other laws and the Civil Rights Acts in the 60s, the Supreme Court even interpreted these amendments in the Constitution as being allowed to keep people separate but equal, which was unfair. If there was no government and if there was no Constitution, I'll take an extreme view, there would not have been segregation, nor would there have been a need for integration. There would have been no police to enforce, hey, you have to drink out of this water fountain versus that water fountain. There would have been, and I think that's
if there was no slavery, there wouldn't be.
Yeah, well, if there was
issues to begin with.
If there was no federal government enforcing slavery laws, an escaped slave would have been escaped. You wouldn't have escaped South Carolina and then been caught in Pennsylvania and sent back down to South Carolina, where you would have been brutally punished. So the reason it's systemic is because a lot of this was baked into the laws. Here's an example, and I probably have talked about this, but the Electoral College was only created to... Everybody was fine with people could have been fine with a direct democracy, which means the President of the United States is elected by a direct vote of the population, and whoever gets the most votes wins the presidency. Well, the United States didn't do that. The United States did what's called an electoral college, where every state you vote for your electors, and then the electors vote for president. Now, the reason they did that is because the North was more populated than the South, so the southern slave owners were afraid that the North would just keep electing officials that would overrule the South. So the Electoral College was created to give the South more power and to keep the balance of power to hold on to slavery. So even the Electoral College is part of systemic racism. Does that mean we get rid of the Electoral College? No, it doesn't, but it means it's something to be looked at, and it means some of these common practices that we depend on and live with might be called into question as we reform. Do all drugs need to put people in jail? Why do you need to? Why does every state have different requirements to vote? Why do different states have different requirements to do different jobs, like licenses, which I talked about yesterday?
Yeah.
So you have to ask these questions in order to have reform. And I think what the peaceful protesters want is they just want to be heard. They don't know all the answers, from what I can tell.
Heard, and they want change.
They want change, but they don't know what change they want. Everybody kind of.
Well, they're getting lists are out now. Their lists are coming out that they want.
Well, they definitely want police reform, and they want less funding for police, particularly if the role of police is they feel is to hurt them, and they want better vetting of police officers before they're hired, which would have solved this last situation. They want better.
They want defunding too of the police force.
Defunding of the police force. They want more strict punishments for people who do these crimes. But there's more than just police reform. There's actually just criminal justice reform. There's education reform. There's economic reform.
Right.
There's voter reform.
They want to move the money around instead of putting all this money into the police force. Put it into the communities that need it. Into the schools, into the health, of the people.
Yeah. So to Uranzi's question, where do things go from here? Well, the lockdowns are finished. Not every store is open yet, but everyone realizes all the stores need to open, businesses need to go back. Part of the reason for the simmering anger underneath that we've seen in a lot of these protests, there's an enormous amount of anger, and part of that is because people simply couldn't feed their families. They didn't have money. The average American at the beginning of this pandemic had only $400 in savings. What do you think they have now? They're in trouble. 40 million people filed for unemployment. And now, yes, today's economic data shows things are going to get better very quickly, but that doesn't undo the fact that 40 million people had to go through such suffering.
Yes.
And so what's going to happen is you're going to see a quick return of millions of people employed. You're going to see stores and restaurants all over the country open. But when the dust settles, you're not going to see everything reopen. Your favorite cafe, your favorite corner mom and pop Italian restaurant, those might be closed forever now. My guess is 30, 40, 50% of small businesses might be just done. We'll get to the bullshit headline of the day. Do not worry, my friend. I can't read the name.
I want to just say something too. Maybe what people can do in the community is help, because of these riots and all the destruction of the buildings, maybe in their neighborhood to help whatever they know, to do. Like they can help with, if they're a carpenter, they can help with that. If they have a glass company, they can maybe help put the glass back up. Who
knows? Or
help the community, just like all of us together.
Yeah,
play a part and build back everything.
Look, I forgot who was it who said, but in the Chinese word for crisis, there's two characters. What do you call each character? Like a kanji character, or is that Japanese?
No, just a character.
So there's two characters in the word for crisis in China, and one character stands for disaster, and the other character stands for opportunity. So a crisis, there's just like this pandemic now is an opportunity for people to figure out what they want to do with their lives. Even these protests, which were so horrible, and there was so much suffering all over the country, and so much pain kind of unleashed, there's going to be an opportunity.
Weiji.
Is that the word for crisis, Camelia?
Weiji.
Chaos leads to order, someone says.
Yeah, Weiji. I don't know what the
what does Wei mean?
What the tone is. Well, way could mean many things, but it depends on the 7 tones. Way.
Jay saying yes.
Yes.
Good, Jay. So here's what's going to happen. A lot of stores and businesses are not going to be open. A lot of people will not get back to employed so quickly, but unemployment is continuing for the next 7 or 8 weeks. The government benefits, there's going to be more stimulus. This stimulus is going to hit the economy in waves. So just really briefly, I'll make some quick predictions. One is the economy and the stock market are going to surge for the next 12 to 18 months and maybe even longer. And there will be reforms that branch out of these protests. I also think if there's going to be a second wave, which I hope there isn't, but you never know. That was Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci the other day was probably feeling ignored because everyone was focusing now on the protests and the rioting and the looting. And so Dr. Fauci said, but wait, don't forget about me. There might be a second wave. Watch out for the second wave. But I think we can clearly say everybody who predicted outbreaks in Georgia, which was the first state to open, Texas, which was the second state to open, Florida, parts of the Southwest like Arizona, those states have fewer cases than ever. New York State, which hasn't reopened, but everybody, I could tell you, everybody's outside. And by the way, no one's social distancing at these protests. There were 50,000 people at the protests the other day, and it's been 11 days of protests, and we can see that there's no new hospitalizations. So the protests themselves, everyone was saying, oh, there's definitely going to be coronavirus among the protesters. Well, so far, it's maybe a tiny bit too early to see, but it does not seem like coronavirus has hit any of the protesters, which means coronavirus itself, the virus itself, might have mutated to the point where it's just not alive anymore in a big way.
But I mean, like, it's like 80% is asymptomatic, and most of those kids out there are the asymptomatic.
That's true. We didn't see elderly out there. We were the oldest people there.
I know.
We're going to get it in 10 days.
No, so they were probably spreading it amongst themselves. It's not going to, hurt them.
And here's the thing, too. The stock market has already largely bounced back. But what's bounced back, it's bounced back in unusual ways. So, like, nobody would have guessed that Zoom video communications would have so much in revenues and profits. So that bounced back. Amazon tech bounced back because we're using all this bandwidth. Facebook bounced back because we're using Facebook right now. Google, everybody's looking at content in YouTube all day long. Netflix up huge. So all of the tech companies did well. All the cruise companies and hotels didn't do as well, but they'll probably come back as well. Here's what we know is that even a month ago, you could start to see people were making airplane reservations and hotel reservations. Like, instead of it being a 100% drop, it was a 50% drop a month ago from where it was in January. So now it's even higher than that. It's something like only a 20% drop in activity. And right now also we can see in Wuhan, where they track a lot of data, we can see people are moving around now almost as much as they were before the pandemic. So we can see that Wuhan, which was the first area afflicted, supposedly, we don't know for sure, but was the first area afflicted, that's bounced back almost completely. We're going to have a similar bounce back, but it will be a new abnormal. Not everything you know will come back, and
there'll be new things coming back.
Your jobs won't necessarily come back, but it will be an opportunity for you and for me, for everybody, to take a look at their lives and say, is this how I want to spend the rest of my life? Like, this lockdown was serious. I was locked down with my loved ones for 12 weeks. I was locked down with my interests for 12 weeks. I was locked down with my skill set for these 12 weeks. Which of these can I improve? Can I improve who I'm around? Can I improve my skills? Can I improve my interests and my abilities in those interests? Can I monetize those interests? So I'm very interested in that, being able to monetize whatever your interests are, as opposed to just simply going back to work.
One interesting thing too that happened with one of our daughters, Lily, is like she's graduating high school this year, but she really didn't know what she wanted to do. I mean, she's going to apply to college next year, so she was going to take a gap year and travel, but that's kind of not going to happen. But during all of this, the protests and all of these things, we really figured out something she has about her passion and her, passion for human rights. So now she's wanting maybe to go to law school. I mean, this is something that she knows. She's reciting all the laws.
You should see when she's arguing with us, she practically already is a lawyer, unfortunately.
And she's citing all these laws, for that the police should be doing, and I'm like, wow, this is great. And she's in tears when she's doing it. So she's very passionate, and I think it's a great thing. I mean, that's what you need, that sort of passion to push you forward into something.
Yeah, and so again, you can ask yourself, maybe you can say to yourself, well, I don't really know what I'm passionate about. Well, try a couple of ideas. One is, over these past 12 weeks, what photos have you loaded onto Instagram? If that might suggest what you're interested in. If every photo you loaded was of of lions in nature, maybe you want to quit your corporate job in New York City and move to a place, what do you call it, where lions are in Africa or whatever.
Yeah,
what are those called?
Like a wellness, like a rehab or something for these
animals.
I don't know. Yeah,
and then or let's say
I wouldn't say a safari, but
also look at your Google search history. What did you spend your most time searching on? Like with Lily, our daughter, she spent a lot of time searching on all of the issues that are occurring during not only the lockdown, but during, I think she got a whole education on economics, law, and everything during these protests.
It's been great.
And understanding how to do a peaceful protest and thinking about that.
And it's hours of talking with her. It's exhausting at times too, but it was really healthy,
The other thing you can do is look at what you were interested in when you were 12 years old. How has that aged? So Matthew Berry recently was on my podcast, and he's the anchor at ESPN for fantasy sports, and he was interested in sports when he was 12. So when he was sick of writing screenplays in Hollywood, which I would consider the dream job, but he did not. He was disgusted with it. He hated his life. He was miserable every day. He couldn't figure out why he was so sad all the time. Finally, he quit that, which was an enormous amount of money for him to give up, and he started writing for $100 a blog post about fantasy sports, which that's how sports aged for him. He couldn't be an athlete, but he became a fantasy sports athlete or whatever, and he started using his writing skills combined with his sports interest to write about fantasy sports, combined with his analytical ability. He's a very good analytical guy, so that helps with fantasy sports, but he was able to add humor and storytelling to blog posts about fantasy sports. He told me at the time all the writing about fantasy sports was very dry and statistics oriented, and he built a huge fan base because he was a comedy writer in Hollywood. He borrowed, I call that borrowing skills. He borrowed skills from his old career, moved it into his passion, and then he became the only person in the world who was like a good fantasy sports writer, and that catapulted his career to the point where now he's like he's making a huge amount of money. He's an anchor at ESPN. He got started. He sold his fantasy sports company to ESPN. So start listing. What were the 10 things I was interested in when I was 12, and how do they age now? Like, let's say you loved music when you were 12, and now you only listen on your commute. Well, maybe you could start a blog, analyzing the music industry, or maybe you could start a blog about songwriting, or maybe you could even write songs, or maybe there's a fantasy music league you could create. I don't know. There used to be the Hollywood Stock Exchange. I don't know if it still exists. I don't think it does. And that was kind of a prediction market of which movies would do well. Maybe there should be you know what there is? If you Google the royalty exchange, you can actually buy parts of the royalties of all your favorite musicians. Like, I can go to the royalty exchange right now, and there's the soundtrack for one of the seasons of the TV show Friends. I can buy one of the royalty streams for that, and you can actually buy the real life royalties. You get, instead of getting a 3% dividend when you buy like a stock, you can get 20% a year on some of these, music streaming royalties. So I know a guy. I don't know if you know. God, what's his name? Junior something. But he was a big, famous Hispanic DJ in New York City 20 years ago. And he was because he was a DJ, he was an expert in all forms of music, all songs, but he felt like he was getting a little too old to be a DJ. So here's what he did. This is this DJ who would just perform at these raves and stuff. He's a famous guy, but one time I was at this dinner and I was sitting next to him and I was just drilling him on what he did. So here's what he did. He was a DJ and he approached KKR, which is Henry Kravis's private equity fund. It's a $100 billion private equity fund. And he said, give me $20 million and I will buy songs. I will buy the royalty streams and the publishing rights instead of buying stocks, instead of having a portfolio of stocks, I'll give you a portfolio of songs. And he did it, and he makes like 20% a year, independent of the economy. It might be Junior Vasquez, I'm not sure. Junior Vasquez sounds familiar, but I don't know if it's this guy. I'm actually Facebook friends with his wife, but not him, so I forget his name. But KKR gave him money, and then I think they've given him up to $200 million to buy the rights to songs from him. Another friend of mine, Matt Smith, he might even be on this IG Live. I don't know. If you are, Matt, say hi. But Matt Smith started the royalty exchange, where now everybody, you don't need money from KKR. You could just go in and start buying pieces of the royalty streams of really famous, well-known songs, whether they're rap songs that you liked in the 90s or movie themes or songs that are coming out now. I think there were 2 Drake songs I could have bought part of the royalty stream for. So again, so there's these 3 techniques. One is list all the things you were interested in when you were 12 and brainstorm on how they can age to where you are now. And use your idea pad, start writing out 10 ideas a day down, and you'll get good at figuring out your passion in this technique. The other thing is review what you took photos of and put on Instagram, or review your search history. So like with our daughter Lily, if you look at her Google search history, it's probably all about the different laws involving racism and the police and law enforcement and protests and what's legal and what's not legal. And so that suggests that perhaps a passion could be legal in the law, or some form of activism or whatever. A third way is a third technique you can use, and this is one that Tim Ferriss told me, is that imagine money was not a concern. If money was not your concern at all, and I'll throw something else in there. Imagine if relevance wasn't your concern. So money, Twitter followers, relevance, downloads, sale, none of that mattered. How would you spend your day? Like tomorrow. So someone puts it, so it's royaltyexchange.com. Thanks for putting that, Mike. So if money and relevance were not issues for you, like let's say you didn't have to care about how to monetize something or how to sell something, what would you do today? So I think for me, I would do podcasts and these IG Lives, and particularly since you've started doing this with me, I've been having so much more fun to have you with me during this. But also I think, I was thinking about this the other day, like I kind of want to write a science fiction novel at some point. I started brainstorming, what would I do if I had to do something else? I wanted to write a science fiction novel. Speaking of songs, I wanted to learn how to write a song. I was starting thinking of all sorts of ideas about what I would do. Another thing is, even though I've been an entrepreneur and I've started many businesses, I very rarely have owned a real bricks and mortar business. Now, I own a comedy club, but I don't consider that as being an entrepreneur. That's like a bad investment. I would not recommend owning a bar, restaurant, or comedy club, particularly in New York City. But I was talking to someone yesterday about, hey, maybe right now, when everybody's sort of coming back to work, this is the $10 million business idea of the week, even though it's the final 3 minutes of talking to you, final 5 minutes. A lot of people are probably looking to shut down their businesses. Maybe they're 60 years old, and this lockdown showed them, you know what? We don't want to run this business anymore. We're tired. We're going to retire. We're going to get the RV. I know a lot of people who bought RVs. By the way, Camping World, the stock for Camping World, which is Marcus Lemonis' company, that stock has shot up because everybody just jumped on their RV and took off. But a lot of businesses will be shutting down. Do you know that 90% of businesses, they don't sell when they're done, they just shut down? Most people think, oh, I'm going to build a business and sell it. That's only kind of like in the tech world. Most businesses, like restaurants or laundromats or car dealerships, they just simply shut down when the owners retire. So you can go and find businesses, and you can go to your accountant, you can go to your lawyer, you can go to even a business broker, but I think an accountant or a lawyer are better. You can say, hey, do you know anybody who's got a small business, maybe a laundromat that's in a good location, that's had steady profits, maybe they want to sell. I'll bet you right now, more than ever, you'll get a good price. Well, what if the company was making $100,000 a profit a year? I'll give you just some quick checklist of items. If a laundromat was making $100,000 in profit a year, don't pay more than $200,000 for it. Number one. B, you might say $200,000. I don't have $200,000 to just hand over to some laundromat. Fine. Here's what you do. Give them $10,000 and say over the next 4 years, the next 5 years, the next 3 years, I'll pay you out the $220,000. So now you'll pay them just out of the profits of what you're doing. So if you're making $100,000 in profit and you're going to pay them $200,000 over 4 years, now $50,000 of your $100,000 in profit will go to pay them, but you really have to pay them almost zero to buy the whole business. Once you have one laundromat, buy a second laundromat, buy a third laundromat. Always buying these laundromats out of the cash flow of the business. So it sounds kind of slimy, like, oh, buy this with no money down. But you really, these businesses would have shut down anyway. So the owner is more than the owner will look at you and say, wait, you're going to give me $10,000 and then I have to do nothing, and you're going to give me $50,000 a year and I have to do zero? And you say, yep, that's exactly it. Done. They'll take that deal every single day. And again, it's a negotiation. So the price is a negotiation. The amount that you put down, try to put down zero, that's a negotiation. The amount of years it takes to pay them off, that's a negotiation. And if the business goes out of business and you can't pay them off, well, the business went bankrupt. They can't go after you personally. So they still got more money than they would have gotten anyway if they were going to shut down. And once you start buying 2 laundromats, 3 laundromats, 4 laundromats, you'll get bulk pricing on detergent, or if you're buying new washing machines, and when you sell the combined business, instead of selling it for 2 times earnings, you'll sell it for 10 times earnings. So now if it makes $2 million in profits, your chain of 20 laundromats around the country, if each one was making $100,000 a year, now because you're getting bulk pricing, now you're able to move them to $120,000 a year in profit. Now you combine them all, and now you're making 20 of them are making $2.4 million in profit, and now you sell it for 5 times earnings. You're going to make almost $6 million. And what did you spend? Well, you spent nothing because you bought these laundromats all out of cash flow. But let's say you flat out spent it. I know I'm getting all numbers, but basically you spent $4 million and you spent $4 million to buy 20 laundromats, making $100,000 each, and you're going to up the income of each one. Overall, they're going to make 20 will make $2.4 million in profits a year, the way I just described it. If you sell for 6 times earnings, what's that? That's $14.4 million. So you spent $4 million and you sell the whole business for $14.4. Meanwhile, you didn't actually spend the $4 million because you financed it out of the profits of the business, so you spent almost nothing, and you sell the whole business for $14.4 million. That is the $10 million business of the week. And that's a tried and true business plan. So many people do businesses like that. And this is the best time. Because of this lockdown, so many people are going to transition out of their business. Call your accountant today and ask him, hey, do you know anybody who's got a business for sale? Anyway, have a good weekend. We're actually flying in a plane on tomorrow or the next day, I forget. And we'll see you on Monday.
And I want to say hi to Christy, one of my best friends.
Hi, Christy. And we'll be back Monday, 2 p.m. More business ideas, more stocks, more entrepreneurial ideas, and another 30-day book challenge on Monday, 2 p.m. Instagram Live. Have a good weekend, everybody, and stay safe.
Bye.